Anger Management, Season 4, Episode 1. Charlie and the Pajama Intervention. Detailed summary ***. The fourth season of Anger Management begins with an episode that perfectly captures the chaotic personality of Charlie Goodson, a former professional baseball player who has reinvented himself as an unconventional anger management therapist. Charlie is supposed to be the person helping other people control their emotions, but his own life continues to be filled with impulsive decisions, questionable relationships, excessive partying, and situations that repeatedly threaten to destroy the stability he has worked to build. In Charlie and the Pajama Intervention, Charlie's inability to control his increasingly reckless lifestyle finally catches up with him when his partying results in an arrest. At the same time, his regular therapy group faces a serious problem of its own. If Charlie cannot continue serving as their therapist, they need to find someone else to help them. The episode uses this situation as both a source of comedy and a reminder that Charlie's professional expertise does not necessarily mean he follows his own advice. Charlie begins the episode in familiar territory, surrounded by people, parties, and the kind of chaotic social environment that has repeatedly caused problems for him. Although Charlie has built a career around helping people understand anger and emotional control, he has never completely abandoned the reckless personality that characterized much of his life before becoming a therapist. His philosophy tends to be practical rather than conventional. He understands human weaknesses extremely well, partly because he has plenty of his own. However, knowing what someone should do and actually doing it are two completely different things. And Charlie repeatedly demonstrates that distinction. His partying becomes increasingly excessive, and the consequences eventually become impossible to ignore. What begins as another night of irresponsible behavior turns into a situation serious enough to involve the police. Charlie ends up arrested, creating an immediate crisis in both his personal and professional life. The arrest is particularly embarrassing because Charlie is supposed to be a responsible therapist. His clients depend on him to demonstrate stability and good judgment. Yet he has once again allowed his own impulses to put him in trouble. The arrest forces Charlie to confront something he has spent much of his life avoiding. His behavior has consequences. He cannot simply joke his way out of every problem, and he cannot rely on his charm to erase the damage caused by reckless decisions. Although Charlie is accustomed to recovering from disasters, this particular situation affects more than his personal reputation. His therapy practice depends on his ability to remain available to his patients, and his legal problems make that increasingly difficult. Charlie's patients are immediately affected by his absence. The therapy group is an unusual collection of people who have developed a strange but genuine dependence on Charlie. Despite his unconventional methods, he has become an important part of their lives. He understands their personalities, their emotional triggers, and the complicated ways they interact with one another. His absence therefore creates uncertainty within the group. Rather than simply waiting for Charlie to return, the patients begin discussing the possibility that they need another therapist. This becomes one of the central comedic situations of the episode. Finding a replacement sounds simple in theory, but the group is not exactly an easy collection of clients for any therapist to manage. Each member has his or her own problems, personality quirks, and expectations. Charlie has spent a long time developing a particular relationship with them, so replacing him is not as straightforward as finding another professional with the same qualifications. The patients' conversations reveal how much they have become accustomed to Charlie's unconventional style. He does not behave like a traditional therapist. Instead of maintaining a completely detached professional distance, Charlie frequently jokes with his patients, challenges them directly, and sometimes uses his own experiences to explain emotional problems. While his approach may seem questionable to outsiders, it has worked surprisingly well for this particular group. As the patients begin considering alternatives, it becomes obvious that they are not entirely comfortable with the idea of replacing Charlie. They complain about his behavior, but they also recognize that he understands them. This contradiction is important because it reflects the broader relationship between Charlie and the people around him. Everyone knows he can be irresponsible and difficult, but they also know that he genuinely cares about the people in his life. Meanwhile, Charlie's arrest forces him to deal with his own problems without the usual distractions. He is accustomed to presenting himself as someone who has everything under control. But the situation makes it clear that his life is much more chaotic than he wants others to believe. His professional identity becomes particularly ironic because he is surrounded by people who expect him to teach emotional discipline while he struggles with his own impulses. Charlie attempts to minimize the seriousness of the situation, using humor and sarcasm to avoid confronting the consequences. This is one of his most recognizable defense mechanisms. When faced with something uncomfortable, he often turns it into a joke. The problem is that joking about a problem does not make it disappear. His friends and patients recognize that he is avoiding responsibility, even if Charlie refuses to admit it immediately. The episode then introduces the idea of a pajama intervention. The intervention is designed to confront Charlie about his behavior and make him recognize that his partying has gone too far. The pajamas themselves add an intentionally ridiculous element to the situation, keeping the storyline consistent with the show's crude and absurd comedic style. Instead of presenting intervention as a solemn, realistic process, the episode turns it into another chaotic Charlie Goodson event. The intervention is particularly ironic because Charlie is normally the person giving advice. He is used to sitting in the therapist's chair and explaining to other people why their behavior is destructive. Now the roles have been reversed. Charlie is the one being confronted, while people around him attempt to convince him that he needs to change. This reversal creates much of the episode's humor. Charlie is extremely comfortable analyzing other people's behavior, but he becomes defensive when the same analysis is applied to him. He can easily identify denial, avoidance, and destructive patterns in his patients, yet he struggles to recognize those exact patterns in himself. The people conducting the intervention therefore have to deal with the same resistance that Charlie encounters during his own therapy sessions. Charlie initially attempts to argue that his behavior is not as serious as everyone claims. He points out that he has survived similar situations before and suggests that the people around him are exaggerating. His confidence is partly genuine and partly a defense mechanism. Charlie does not want to admit that his lifestyle is becoming increasingly difficult to control. The intervention gradually forces him to listen. Although Charlie remains sarcastic and resistant, the people around him continue explaining why they are concerned. Their argument is not simply that Charlie likes to party. The deeper issue is that his partying has begun interfering with his responsibilities and relationships. He is no longer dealing only with harmless personal choices. His decisions are affecting his work, his patients, and the people who care about him. One of the more interesting aspects of the episode is that Charlie's friends and patients are not demanding that he completely change his personality. They know that would be unrealistic. Instead, they want him to recognize when his behavior crosses the line. Charlie's problem is not that he enjoys having fun. It is that he repeatedly fails to recognize when fun has turned into self-destructive behavior. The situation also highlights Charlie's relationship with his family. His former wife, Jennifer, remains an important part of his life because they share children and continue to interact regularly. Their relationship has always been complicated, partly because Jennifer understands Charlie's personality better than most people. She knows when he is being sincere and when he is hiding behind sarcasm. Jennifer's involvement adds another layer to the intervention. Charlie may be willing to dismiss criticism from friends, but criticism from someone who knows his history is harder to ignore. She has seen Charlie at his best and worst, and she understands how quickly his behavior can spiral when he refuses to take responsibility. At the same time, Charlie's daughter Sam represents another reason why his behavior matters. Charlie wants to be a good father, even though he frequently makes mistakes. His chaotic lifestyle can affect how his children perceive him, and this creates an uncomfortable contrast between the father he wants to be and the irresponsible behavior he sometimes demonstrates. The episode also continues the show's exploration of Charlie's complicated professional identity. He became an anger management therapist after his own struggles with anger ended his baseball career. In many ways, his career is built on his personal failures. He understands anger because he has experienced it. He understands addiction-like behavior because he has struggled with impulsiveness. He understands relationship problems because his own romantic life is a mess. That makes Charlie an unconventional but effective therapist. His patients do not necessarily need someone who appears perfect. They need someone who understands how difficult change can be. Charlie's imperfections sometimes make him more relatable, even though they also create enormous problems. The arrest, however, reminds him that there are limits to how much chaos he can tolerate. Being arrested is not just another funny story. It is evidence that his behavior is beginning to affect his freedom and his ability to function normally. Charlie cannot simply continue assuming that everything will work out because it usually has in the past. While Charlie deals with his own situation, his therapy group continues searching for a replacement. Their attempts to find another therapist produce additional comedic moments because each person has different expectations. Some want someone who behaves like Charlie, while others are ready for a completely different approach. The group quickly realizes that finding a professional is easier than finding someone who understands their specific dynamic. This storyline also reveals that Charlie's therapy sessions have created a genuine community among the patients. They have spent so much time together discussing their problems that they have developed relationships with one another. Even when they argue, they have a shared history. Charlie's absence threatens to disrupt that structure. Eventually, the patients begin to understand that they may not actually want to replace Charlie permanently. They may be frustrated with him, but they recognize that he has helped them make progress. This realization parallels Charlie's own situation. He may not be ready to admit it, but he also needs the people around him. The intervention therefore becomes more than an attempt to stop Charlie from partying. It becomes a confrontation about responsibility and relationships. Charlie is being forced to recognize that his actions do not exist in isolation. Every reckless decision affects someone else. Despite the serious implications, the episode never becomes overly dramatic. Charlie continues making inappropriate jokes, resisting advice, and trying to turn uncomfortable moments into comedy. This is essential to his character. Even when he is genuinely struggling, he remains Charlie Goodson. He is not suddenly transformed into a completely responsible person simply because people confront him. Instead, the episode suggests that personal growth is gradual. Charlie may recognize that he has a problem, but recognizing it does not mean he will immediately solve it. The comedy comes from watching him attempt to negotiate with the people trying to help him while still looking for ways to maintain his freedom and lifestyle. The pajama intervention itself becomes symbolic of Charlie's situation. He is being placed in an environment where his usual defenses are stripped away. He cannot simply walk into a therapy session, give advice, and leave. He is now the patient, and everyone else is watching him. This role reversal is particularly effective because Charlie has spent so much time believing he is smarter than everyone around him. He often assumes he can manipulate situations through charm, humor, or psychological insight. The intervention challenges that assumption. His friends know his tricks, and they refuse to let him escape the conversation. Eventually, Charlie begins to acknowledge that his behavior has become problematic. He may still resist some of the criticism, but he cannot completely deny the evidence. His arrest, his relationships, and the concern of the people around him all point toward the same conclusion. Something needs to change. The episode ends without turning Charlie into a completely different person. Instead, it leaves him in a familiar but slightly more self-aware position. He understands that he has pushed things too far and that the people around him are genuinely concerned. His problems are not magically solved, but he has at least been forced to confront them. The therapy group also reaches a better understanding of their relationship with Charlie. They realize that while his behavior can be frustrating, he is still their therapist and someone they trust. Their search for a replacement ultimately reinforces how difficult it is to replace a person who has become an important part of their emotional lives. Charlie and the Pajama Intervention therefore works as a classic anger management episode because it turns Charlie's greatest contradiction into the central joke. He is a therapist who is constantly in need of therapy himself. He can explain anger, relationships, and emotional control to other people. Yet his own life remains a collection of questionable decisions and impulsive behavior. The episode also establishes the tone for the fourth season. Charlie remains surrounded by his patients, his family, his friends, and his complicated romantic relationships. His professional life continues to collide with his personal life, and his attempts to maintain control repeatedly create new problems. The result is a character who is simultaneously confident and insecure, insightful and hypocritical, caring and selfish. At its core, the episode is about accountability. Charlie wants the freedom to live however he chooses, but the people around him remind him that freedom comes with consequences. His arrest is the clearest warning sign, yet that his behavior cannot continue indefinitely without affecting his life. The intervention also demonstrates that Charlie is not alone. Even though he often behaves as if he can handle everything himself, the people around him care enough to confront him when he goes too far. They are willing to embarrass him, challenge him, and force him to look at his behavior because they do not want to watch him destroy the progress he has made. For the therapy group, the episode reinforces their dependence on Charlie's unconventional guidance. For Jennifer, it highlights the continuing difficulty of dealing with an ex-husband whose behavior can still affect their family. For Sam, it demonstrates the complicated reality of having Charlie as a father. And for Charlie himself, it becomes an uncomfortable reminder that being a therapist does not make him immune to the problems he teaches others how to handle. Ultimately, Charlie and the Pajama Intervention is less about Charlie suddenly becoming a better person and more about forcing him to recognize that his lifestyle has consequences. His arrest provides the immediate crisis, the intervention provides the confrontation, and the therapy group's search for another therapist demonstrates how his behavior affects the people who depend on him. The episode balances these elements with the show's trademark adult humor, sarcasm, awkward situations, and Charlie's refusal to take anything completely seriously. By the end, Charlie remains flawed, unpredictable, and frustrating. But there is a small indication that he understands why the people around him are worried. His journey as an anger management therapist continues to be ironic because the man teaching everyone else how to control their emotions is still learning how to control his own life. That contradiction remains one of the central sources of comedy in anger management. And this season premiere uses it to establish another chapter in Charlie Goodson's chaotic story.